Hello, this is Dr. Fraad, here with Capitalism Hits Home, a show about the mutual shaping of capitalism with all the other forces in our lives, in our personal lives particularly, gender, race, emotional connection, personal relationships, with all of those things that usually are presented as quite separate from capitalism, but really are intimately and intricately shaped by capitalism. This show is brought to you by Democracy at Work. You could go on the internet and find Democracy at Work. You can find Capitalism Hits Home on Democracy at Work or just on the internet. But there are many podcasts and programs that are excellent, including Economic Update with Richard Wolff and many others. Today, I want to particularly thank our Patreon listeners who helped to make this possible, because in this capitalist system of ours, money helps do anything. So here we are. Today, I want to talk about how capitalism and patriarchy shape one another in the very prominent cases we've been hearing about recently. That of Cuomo, that of Cosby, that of Weinstein, that of Epstein. And of course, there's thousands of others. I'm not even going to talk about Roger Ailes or O'Reilly or Korn at ABC. I mean, there's so many sex assaulting males in dominant and prominent positions. But I'm going to focus on those four just because they're recent and they may be in your minds. Now, in order for you to understand what I'm talking about, I ought to explain what I mean by these terms, because they're thrown about without any precision. Patriarchy is a system in which human beings are divided by genitals and gender, and where women's lives are less valuable than men's, and where women are considered people who are available to serve men in whatever capacity those men need. And they are not fully human. They are different. You really can't abuse people if you see them as being like you, with your same feelings and needs. And I'm talking about sex abuse by prominent men. Not that women don't commit sex abuse. There are plenty of women in executive positions who try to coerce their male underlings into having sex with them. And that puts pressure on those male underlings. But in our society, where one of the few needs men are allowed to trumpet is a need for sex, the sex abuse statistics are overwhelmingly male. Certain things are overwhelmingly male, like mass murder and sex abuse. At any rate, I want to explain what I mean about what is patriarchy in this case. What is capitalism? And patriarchy is a system by which women's lives are worth less than men's. Women are there as breeders. Women are there to do domestic work, which is not rated highly, and the work of connecting men with other people in our current society, inviting friends over, serving them, relating to relatives, not only creating children, but bringing children up, supervising children, and the emotional work of caring. For many men, the emotional revelation of their own feelings is only possible with a sex partner, because the sex partner is still a manly thing to do, to have sex with a woman. And so you can have feelings and express them to a woman that you're sexual with without losing your valuable machismo. So that's what patriarchy is. And an anti-patriarchal movement asserts that women are fully human and men and women are capable to the full range of possibility and for the full range of human activities. Capitalism is a system of one group economically dominating the other. And by economically dominating, in capitalism, I mean that you never employ someone as an employer unless they make more money for you than you pay them. Because otherwise, why hire somebody if you're not making a profit? That's obvious. And even in the cases of bureaucratic workers at an office, you are helping facilitate the capitalist exploitation of the people at the top. So you have a public school system in which people aren't working directly to make money for somebody else, but they're working to educate the workforce sufficiently so that you can exploit them better, so that they know certain basic skills they need to have for their employer. And they are basically subsumed class workers. Now, of course, class designations, like all designations, don't fit neatly into human complexity. So someone can be an independent worker. She can knit homemade sweaters and sell them as an independent worker. Then she can go to a capitalist workplace and work to make money for her boss. Then she can come home and be a disempowered woman whose job is to serve her man in a kind of feudal serf way in his apartment with the tools he provides. So class is very fluid. Class is a relationship that people have. And those relationships over time that make the economy work are divided into the many who labor and the few who benefit, so that in feudal times, the pharaoh and his retinue benefited while the slaves did the heavy manual labor. Then in feudalism, the serfs and their families labored and gave a portion of what they produced to the lord of the manor, who had the right, because he was born a lord of the manor, to take from that serf a portion of what he produced. In fact, the lords usually gave just enough for the serfs to survive according to whatever the standard of serf life was at the time, which was not particularly opulent. And there, instead of pharaoh and slave, or as in the South, plantation owners and slaves, you have serfs and lords. Then after feudalism, capitalism emerged, in which you have two classes: the employer, for whom the employee works to make that employer rich, and the worker, who gets a certain portion of the value that he produces for the employer, just enough to live on. And that's negotiable. When people strike, they get more. When they have work stoppages and other things, they're negotiating to get more. But the balance of wealth is still in the hands of those who accumulate the wealth from their workers' labor. So that the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk is also right up there, get labor, get the fruits of other people's labor, even though they work in terrible conditions. They get a wage, and that wage is negotiated. And in Bezos's case, as well as all Walmart, the richest family in the world, the Waltons, spend a lot of money, tens of millions, making sure that their workers are not empowered as employees, that the class division between employer and employee is maintained between the many who work to make the few rich. A socialism is a government in which the government is very powerful and the people are powerfully shaping that government so that capitalists have a real break on them and social opportunities are provided. So that in a place like Sweden, single mothers get better housing, they get clothing allowances, they get childcare and after school care, and everyone gets those things. Everyone gets after school care, childcare, free health insurance, like the rest of Europe and Portugal, which is governed by the Green Party, Communist Party, and Socialist Party. Capitalists have to negotiate, and they can't fully exploit workers as they can right now in the United States and in Pakistan and India and in some places in China. Although China's another story that I can't tell now. China's workers are actually, their standard of living has gone up 20 times since the Chinese Revolution in 1949. And they did take 850 million people out of poverty. But capitalist employers who go there extract profit and pay the workers less than they take from that workers' labor to contribute to the products they make. And that's what capitalism is about, a class of employers that are few relative to the class of employees, who are many. And when I look at how capitalism and patriarchy shape the recent rash of revelations about sex abuse, which has been a constant, but what is different is it's now on the map because of the feminist movement, because of women's empowerment. Women feel like that's an area they don't necessarily have to serve men by being sexually available. And so that gender role of serving men sexually can be separated from serving men as employees at the workplace. Now, I'm going to only choose 4 of the vast array of sex abuse cases we have seen. And I'm choosing them because they're recent. They're in our minds. I'm not going to mention Roger Ailes and Fox News and their sex abuse and gender abuse of women who had to sit at glass desks so you could see their legs and wear short skirts and high heels to show off their legs, and also had to provide sex to the disgusting old Roger Ailes in order to keep their jobs. I'm not even going to talk about that because that happened a while ago. I'm going to talk about Cosby, Cuomo, Weinstein, and Epstein. And I can also mention R. Kelly so that we have an interracial group of sex abusers to talk about. Now, if we look at them individually, we can see patterns that are collective patterns. Let's start with Cuomo because he's in the news very recently. And if you're in New York, his case is prominent. And he's recently had to resign from the governorship of New York because of 11 women's cases against him for creating a hostile, sexist environment and also inappropriately propositioning them, and in one case, reaching under someone's shirt and grabbing her breast and doing other things that made it very clear to those women working in that capitalist workplace that the boss, who had so much power over their career, over their wages, over their job conditions, wanted them to provide sex, a patriarchal gift from their lowly status as women. Now, Cuomo was also a terrible bully in his office. He screamed and yelled at the men, too, as well as women. But women were chosen for sex abuse as a way of both demeaning them and also showing that as the capitalist in charge, he could ruin or make their careers, which he stressed over and over again in the testimony. You want to get ahead in this career? You don't want to be fired? Wear sexy outfits to work. In one case, he criticized a woman who wore a flannel shirt. You look like a lumberjack, not in my office. You're there to sexually entertain me, even though it's not in your job description. Because part of the gender and patriarchal messages were, you're there to serve me, and one way I want to be served in this office is sexually. And what I can hold over you is my capitalist dominance to make your career, to give you a promotion, to give you more money, to demote you, also to smear you and destroy your career by having people find out dirt on you, because I have a staff to do that, and spread it around and make sure other employers won't touch you either. And Cuomo had 11 women come out and testify, among many other women who made statements but are not part of the suit. There was the female state trooper who Cuomo found sexually attractive. So he had her moved way beyond the seniority rules. He had her become his personal protective detail, and then made sexually inviting and demeaning comments to her. And right behind her in that job was, well, if he demotes me, if he badmouths me as an employee, I could lose my job in the state police force on which I depend, and so do my children. He used capitalist pressure to press his patriarchal privilege. In the case of Weinstein, who just recently went to LA, having had been found guilty in New York, and at 66 years old, having 23-year sentence in New York for attempted rape and sexual assault of various women. And tens of women came forward because Weinstein could make or break an actress's career. Actresses' careers disappeared when he got the word around that they were, to other directors, they were difficult to work with. Their career as an actress was over. Their employ as a star who could make money, that was over. And that's what he did. He threatened women. He coerced women. He masturbated in front of them when they were aspiring young actresses or more established actresses who counted on him so that they could make a good living as actresses, so that they could perform. And what he had behind him was a studio that made a lot of money and made money for them and could make or break a star. And also reputation in every other studio because he was so powerful. And there were tens of women who came forward. Then we go to the case of Cosby, who was considered, everyone's black uncle. He was very famous. He had connections in the media and on television. He invited aspiring starlets back to his office, having been quite avuncular, the kind uncle, giving them helpful tips about their career and so on, so that hopeful young women would come to his office, where he would offer them coffee, which had date rape drugs in it, so that they would pass out and he could sexually abuse them while they were in a semi-comatose state. Talk about the need for sexual ascendancy. Some of these women would have had sex with him anyway, married or not, which he was. But he wanted the total ascendancy of a woman who passed out. And 80 women testified. He's right now out of jail because he admitted to all of this to a district attorney who promised him that he would not be prosecuted in the future. But the new one has come up, and she'll maybe find him guilty. In the meantime, if 80 women came forward, probably more than 100 were abused, and he gained total ascendancy over their bodies, which gave him total patriarchal control. We can go on to the case of, I'm thinking about this, so many, Mario Batali had sexually coerced the women who wanted to work in his restaurant and needed that job in a high-profile restaurant, or Roger Ailes at Fox News and O'Reilly at Fox News. But I'll go with the ones that I mentioned: Cuomo, Cosby, Weinstein, and Epstein. And we've only covered Cuomo and Weinstein. No, Cuomo and Cosby. Next is Weinstein, who I did mention, who had power over all of these starlets' careers and insisted on sexually molesting them and gaining dominance over them. He didn't care that they were basically frightened and uninterested. He wanted that domination as a perk of his power, his capitalist power over them in the film workplace. Then there's Epstein, who molested so many girls. 35 of them brought up the suit in Florida recently, before he got out to continue his abuse. And those 35 had their cases belittled by his getting a slap on the wrist. For 35 young women, some underage, the abuse of underage women, he got 2 months in jail with 6 days a week off. He had to be back at 6 o'clock. He could leave in the morning. And he had to be spending Sundays there. That was it. And off at his office, he could be sexually abusing more girls. And the way he got away with this was a slight wrinkle. I mean, he did give the tapes of famous rich men raping underage girls to the CIA, which was valuable information in case they needed it. And he operated the Lolita Express, which was an express plane to what he called Slave Island, where you could rape young girls as slaves. 2 past presidents flew on the Lolita Express, and they were Trump and also Clinton. You could also rape women on the plane. Of course, those flight logs have disappeared, and so have the tapes. But the most important thing for us is, how did he manage this? How did he combine patriarchy, which is women are there to serve you sexually from age 12 and up, and as long as they have sexually maturing organs, they're there to use for rich men or for men in general. And so that all those rich men who came to Slave Island and molested or raped girls from 12 or 13 on up to early 20s couldn't really be thinking of these as girls and worrying about, gee, how does this human being feel while I rape her? How does she feel like she's being provided for me for the purpose of my sexual pleasure? And I'm 3 times her age. And how did he get girls to do this? Well, he did employ them. He and his madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, offered them jobs as massage therapists. And the people they recruited were often homeless girls who desperately needed the money, or girls from terribly poor families who desperately needed the money. That was the overwhelming number of these girls he recruited. And then when he raped them in his beautiful mansion with its statues and Persian carpets, they felt frightened and dirtied and awed by his wealth. And when he farmed them out to other very rich men, they felt they were shamed by their sexuality, because in patriarchy, men are excused for preying on women, or they used to be, whereas women are considered sullied and dirtied by it. In Arab countries, many of them, in Victorian England and Victorian United States, if a girl was a servant girl raped by her master, she was thrown out of the house as a sinner, and the master wasn't, because girls were blamed for men's sexuality. Until recently, and even now, in rape trials, girls are slut-shamed. Well, no wonder. You were wearing a short skirt or a low blouse. Of course, the way you dress is not a crime. Rape is supposed to be the crime. And tens of thousands of rape kits are just thrown out by the police. Because rape, which happens to women overwhelmingly, wasn't considered anything much to bother with. In the armed forces, where women are competing with men, one of the ways that men gain ascendancy over women who they don't want in the military is by raping or molesting them. 1 in 4 women in the armed forces reports being sexually assaulted in some way. Because it's a discipline. We are men. We control this. We are in charge. And the person in charge who makes money can do whatever they want to the people who are in that class called employees and who are dependent employees. So Epstein wowed these poor girls with his wealth, sexually humiliated and intimidated them. His madam hired them as massage therapists. And during the massage, he was sexually preying on them, and they were intimidated by the grandeur of the surroundings and the money in the surroundings in which they were sexually used. So that patriarchy was a system of humiliation of women and sexual use of women, combined with capitalism, the money that surrounded them, and the money they didn't have. R. Kelly used his power in a slightly different way. He was a famous, wealthy singer, and he recruited to his little circle girls of 12 on up to sexually service him or be beaten and humiliated because he had money and fame and could either make or break them. He married one of the girls who he met at 12 years old. He married her at 15 and had them lie and say she was 18. I think you pronounce her name as Elia. Helped to make her a known singer. If she hadn't cooperated, she wouldn't have been a known singer and made money. And so you can see the mutual shaping here of a system of patriarchy, demoting women to a less than human status, and capitalism, using employer status on women to get them to sexually comply, because it isn't enough to make money off of them. You also want to access all the services you can. Someone, like Cuomo, right now is being also sued for fraud because he had the women in his office work on the book for which he got $5 million as an advance for how successfully he handled the pandemic. So that he used them, they were there to service him however he needed it, even though it's illegal to get $5 million for a book advance that you have other people write for you. There was also the question of fraud against Cuomo, who bullied people into complying, and of informing his lieutenant there, per Coco, of the trial against him. Now, I've laid the groundwork defining capitalism and patriarchy and touched on 4 or 5 prominent sex abusers who used their position against women who are potential employees, against their financial possibilities for flourishing and survival. But that's all for today. This is brought to you by Democracy at Work. Thank you. Goodbye for now.